Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Well, good evening everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World, a follow-up tonight to last week's show, Cabal, a global coup. Tonight we're going to be talking about the global coup and also the Cabal and also the Kabbalah, which we started to talk about last week. I've been studying this for many years, and it has infiltrated and infected many types of people and many systems of thought. We're going to get into that tonight. But first, I'm going to refer to this document, which is allegedly leaked by a member of the Canadian Parliament, and it seems to go along with exactly what's happening. And it's basically a blueprint, and it's really all that we have come to expect, and those who feared the worst will not be disappointed. Basically, it's telling us what we already know. But it's quite interesting because it's debatable as to whether this is actually a real document or whether it's just a warning. Who knows? Does it really matter? But we are experiencing more lockdowns in more cities, and it's getting more draconian. We've also got the policies of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 being ramped up alongside it, of course, with what is known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset. So all of this is incorporated into COVID-19, the action plan. This week I've been talking about extensions of this, and indeed, when I was talking about areas being locked off years ago through Agenda 21 and cities being made basically walkable and cyclable only, people were saying I was exaggerating. Well, under the COVID action plan, reports are coming in all over and from all over the country about cities being basically locked off with, of course, massive tree planters going in the middle of roads. This has been happening since 2014. Take a look at an article I did called Big Society Change Agents at windowsontheworld.net. Also, a talk I did at last year's Glastonbury Symposium, Mark Windows, the Bigger Picture. And you can find that on windowsontheworld.net under the plan to rule the world. I'm not exaggerating there, really. It's exactly what it is. And if you scroll down into the articles section and shows at the bottom, you'll find that. You'll find that, which was done last year. It was a talk I gave in 2019 when we were still going around the country trying to inform people about what was actually going to happen. And newsflash, news just in, it's happened, and it's escalated at about 1,000 miles an hour. But yes, more cities are locked down, and this document, which was released from allegedly a member of the Canadian Parliament, looks quite accurate to me, and said this would be expanding outwards, in other words, outwards from the cities into more rural areas from November. Well, the UK is well ahead on most of this stuff. Isolation facilities would be appearing by December this year. The cases are surging through the over-amplified and ineffective test already, and this is going to be expanded upon according to this. More deaths will be attributed to COVID-19 if that's possible. I mean, how many more deaths can they attribute to this virus than they have done already? I mean, we're talking about 90,000 deaths the other day this was. It's quite unbelievable. I mean, the deaths that are attributed to COVID, we went into this last week with the Liverpool lockdown, of course. The testing in the hospitals started just a few days before the lockdown was announced. And of course, then we get cases. So people who test positive, which is many, because even as Boris Johnson said, 93% of tests are false positives. Why would they use them? Well, because there's a very good reason to. But yes, more deaths being attributed to COVID, it's said in this document. If that's possible, by the end of December, there would be more strict lockdowns. Well, we're pretty much getting there, aren't we? Universal Basic Income Programme would be rolled out from December. We are now hearing this, and it's being implemented in Wales, a place of mass compliance at the moment and a place of lockdown, a 2-week lockdown. And we have the Welsh government asking the supermarkets to start reselling non-essential items which they'd covered up with polythene. It is very bizarre, and I think it's meant to be. It's a destabilisation process. It's also a demoralisation process. It's also future shock. It's every form of psychological warfare you can possibly think of in a very simplistic way. But there'd be a secondary virus, according to this document, leading to a third wave by February, which would be much worse and have a higher infection rate. Well, they'd have to really release something quite dangerous for that to happen. But let's not forget that many of the population have been wearing down their immune systems through stress and wearing masks. So it may actually be that we will get a spike in real flu deaths in January and February. And usually we have about 50, 60,000 deaths. Well, we did in 2017-18. You can check the statistics on that. And yes, it says here COVID-related deaths will exceed medical care capacity in the first and second quarters of 2021. The second quarter of 2021, everyone will be pushed onto universal basic income. Well, that's a good reason to stay off it then. As long as possible, stay out of the system. That's my advice, but I'm just one of them conspiracy theorists. The sort of person who the Centre for Countering Digital Hate would actually describe as a hate-filled right-wing extremist, because anybody who says anything against the official fake narrative is now just that. We've been covering that quite a bit on the shows over the last few weeks. Actually, take a look at a show I did with North Idaho Exposed, someone called Casey Whalen. And he set up this thing called People's Rights, where they go and assist people who may be in trouble. And that could really catch on in the UK. So an underground network of people who are switched on and willing to help each other out. Not like those who are buried in their TV sets and believing everything that is being told to them. They are now the enemy of the state, the new state, the no-fit state. Yeah. Supply chains, though, it says here, are going to be breaking down, and food shortages and more instability. Well, we've been predicting this for years. The whole idea of control through the food supply is nothing new. There'd be deployment of military, more checkpoints, more travel restrictions by the third quarter of next year. Well, that's already happening in the UK. We're now seeing civil contingencies, army people being employed by local councils. And, of course, what we get is pictures of officers, army officers and army personnel in their army uniforms. Now, the Civil Contingencies Act is really just about them working as civilians. So what we're seeing here through the media is this kind of presence of the military. This pandemic, this whole COVID-19 action plan is all based on theatre. Now, I'm not even going to get into the virus tonight because we've got too much to do, and we're really talking about the mind virus on this show. But it does say that the global financial crisis will lead to debt relief and the World Debt Reset Programme, which will mean that people will be encouraged to forfeit all their assets and all their property. Everyone will be vaccinated to be allowed to travel. Those who take the vaccination and the biometric ID will be allowed to travel freely. This will be the health pass or the common pass, which is actually being advertised already. Refusal to do this would mean that you would live under lockdown restrictions indefinitely. Those who did not participate would be demonised by, yes, of course, the useful idiots and the gullible public. I was having a bit of a laugh about this the other day, this so-called Wibble movement. It's like hashtag Wibble, which sounds stupid anyway, but the people who band it around are even more stupid. And what they'll do is if you put a fact down about COVID-19, they will put hashtag Wibble. And they are encouraged not to engage with people who are producing facts or, as they are told to believe, are full of hate. They're told not to actually get involved with them, which shows you how mentally helpless these people are. In other words, they're being told not to engage, which is another way of keeping them completely ignorant. So yeah, the hashtag Wibble movement, read it on Facebook. It's absolutely hilarious. I was going to talk about it on the show, but it's actually not worth it. These people are beyond belief and beyond help. But those who did not participate, of course, are going to be demonized by these people, and they would be deemed a public safety risk and taken to isolation facilities, it said on this thing. Well, it's not too far-fetched, is it? All assets would then be seized for those who do not comply. Now, this is nothing new. This is what's been going on for years, people having their assets seized. And there's loads of ways that this can actually be done, even through proceeds of crime, but also through debt. There's nothing new here. It's been a slow trickle, and now it's an avalanche. That's the difference. The so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution is the result of a lot of planning. They are not going to give up this plan. Who would have thought it would even come this far so soon? But the World Economic Forum COVID Action Platform on the 15th of October, let's get into that, advancing their reset programme alongside the cover story of the pandemic, of course, that never was. Borge Brend, a particularly kind of faltering and uninteresting person, which is not unusual for the World Economic Forum, is it? He's actually president of the World Economic Forum now. He says, in 2 months of the pandemic, the technological advancement for the post-COVID world has accelerated by 5 years. This is quite incredible, isn't it? Because what they've actually put in a few months, in the first few months of this year, they could not have achieved in 5 years with their technocratic innovation and implementation. Quite incredible, isn't it? Yes, he says that artificial intelligence is projected to increase global GDP by 15%. But for who? Well, the corporations, who are the stakeholders of your future. He also said, this is Borge Brend, the president at the moment of the World Economic Forum, 5G would generate $13 trillion in global economic value and 22 million jobs by 2035. It's 22 million, eh? Oh, that's the work in action, isn't it? We have 11, 22 and 33. Oh, it's getting a bit Kabbalistic, this, isn't it? Am I a conspiracy theorist? Am I full of hate? He said the technological divide will deepen with half the world population not on the internet. Well, how's that going to happen? Well, some people are obviously going to be left behind, and I do hope it's me. The dull, scheming, unimaginative technocrats are in a position to decide what and who gets to run this slave-tronic system. It's quite incredible what has actually happened in, well, it's nearly 9 months now, isn't it? October 24th, 2020. This is from biometricupdate.com. Biometric payment, access and identification cards are launching around the world. Efforts to harness digital identity to revive the travel and tourism sector are advancing, usually in combination with facial recognition. But experts wonder if banks might be uniquely positioned to help move digital ID development along. Well, the World Bank is going to be doing that because they've been behind it all the way, and they are behind the Great Reset, and they are going to be the funders of this universal basic income. Where did you think the money was coming from? It's not coming from our government. It's already been admitted what's going on. If you go to the World Economic Forum website, go to the World Bank website, take a look at what's going on. When they say they're reviving the travel industry, though, I mean, it's kind of incredible, isn't it? So they're reviving the travel industry, which they've just killed. It's like the murderer with a knife covered in blood saying he's trying to revive the victim, not kill them. I mean, it's just unbelievable, this, isn't it? He says a new partnership, this is from Biometric Update again, a new partnership on biometric payment cards by MasterCard and IDEMIA is being launched with a pilot expected in Q4. That's next year. That's the fourth quarter of next year. So, it says here, Huduma Namba is moving towards the issuance of identification cards, which will be embedded with biometric data to enable authenticated access to government services. Try it out in the quiet places first, see if it works, and then roll it out en masse as usual. Belarus is also launching biometric ID cards, with a test of 800 cards expected to begin soon. Australia's plan to provide digital identity for government service access is well underway. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to drive digital identity efforts in several different sectors, and apps utilising facial recognition for the aviation and tourism industries involving YOTI, the Commons Project Foundation, and of course, guess who? Yes, the World Economic Forum and Onfido have been rolled out recently, along with a smartphone camera-based biometric rapid testing app from Safan Labs. Oh, it's going along at leaps and bounds, isn't it? The fourth industrial revolution is here. We're on the verge of the Great Reset. Are you ready to lose everything? Are you ready to be controlled by artificial intelligence? Or are you going to try and escape? NIST has published a new leaderboard for its facial recognition accuracy with masked faces testing. So basically, they're using the masked population to check if their facial recognition for mask wearers works. And of course, we've already got garden centres in the UK using mask recognition and several shops. So we do have our beloved stakeholders already on board. And the big stakeholders are going to be there pretty soon. So the whole premise of COVID-19, Certificate of Vaccination ID, is to asset strip you completely and get you subservient and dependent. Well, who would have thought? The reduction of population must therefore be through the Vaccine ID programme. It has to be that, doesn't it? Now, when you start looking into this, and this is what the public don't want to face, they do not want to face the depopulation programme. They'd rather watch TV instead. So in less than a year, most of the objectives of the World Economic Forum have already been reached. So we're going to have a short break and we're going to come back in a couple of minutes.
If you realise how deep the rabbit hole goes, I mean, the people coming out now, even in the entertainment business, saying, I sold my soul to the devil so I could be famous. And you go, Jesus, yeah. And you look at people and you think, how did he get famous? He's crap. You know, and then you think, oh, he must have sold his soul to the devil. Oh, here's Wayne again. He's going to give us all that New World Order crap. And you think, oh, well, why am I wasting my time even mentioning it? You know, it's only in conversation. And they'd rather talk about football. And, you know, you think, oh, what a waste of space. You know, and it's, oh, Manchester United did this, and you think, what a load of crap, who cares? You know, who cares about Manchester United and Manchester City? And then you look, you think, this is it, they're just programmed. That's going to be their life. You know, women will watch soaps and men will go to football, and then you'll get up in the morning, you'll go to work and you'll do this, and then you'll finish at 5 if you're lucky. You'll go home, you won't have time for your kids, you won't... And you think, but is this what we're born for? You know, just to be slaves, really. You're just slaves.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Welcome back. And now the digital cabal, the digital Kabbalists with their zeros and ones on or off. This is the problem with digitisation. Problem with digital, it's in the pulses. Digital is made of pulses, so music can never sound the same as a pulse is on and off. In reality, sound fades slowly. That's a little point I wanted to make there about bringing back analogue. Now we're going to get into the follow-up to last week's show, which was really about the Cabal and the Kabbalah. Yes, we're going to get into that and what the Kabbalists believe. And tonight we're going to take that a step further. We're going to get into past the early history of the Kabbalah, which we did on last week's show, and get into really what happened after the 12th century. which is when the real infiltration started. And quite interestingly, brought in different religions. Just to recap, Moses Maimonides, physician and philosopher, 1135 to 1204, was allegedly the greatest Jewish thinker of the Middle Ages. He denounced the whole allegorical and fake mystery of the Kabbalah. He said, give no credence to the nonsense of the writers of charms and amulets, to what they tell you or what you find in their foolish writings about divine names which they invent without any sense, calling them appellations of the deity. We did go into all this last week, the magical thinking, the fantasy which Kabbalah has wreaked upon the world is nothing compared to what the later proponents of Kabbalah have actually created, which is literally to bring back chaos upon the earth. But page 22, let's have a look at this now. I wanted to read something out for you. The 9th century book of Jazira, the contemplation of Abraham into the unity of God. It was pre-Zohar. The Zohar was written by Moses de Leon under the name Simon ben Yochai because he thought he'd sell more books. And that was in the 1200s. And basically this 9th century book of Jazira was before the Kabbalah spread through the Languedoc and out into Spain. But it's quite interesting what it says here about this, actually, because we have some fascinating insights in this book. Now, this is from this earlier book, which influenced the later Kabbalists, the Book of Jazira. The book opens with a statement that by 32 paths of secret wisdom, the Eternal, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the living God, the King of universe, the merciful and gracious, get on with it, the high and exalted God, blimey, he who inhabits eternity, glorious and holy is his name. This is typical of the later Kabbalists, actually. They loved going on and on and on and on. Yes, glorious and holy is his name, hath created the world by means of number, word and writing. This is what it's all about, the gematria. The book shows why there are just 32 of these, right? Now, this is kind of incredible. It shows you what a load of rubbish it is, basically. By an analysis of this number, it seeks to exhibit in a peculiar method of theosophical arithmetic on the assumption that they are the signs of existence and thought, the doctrine that God produced all and is over all, the universe being a development of original entity and existence, being but thought, becomes concrete. In short, yes, let's have it in short, please. In short, that instead of the heathenish or popular Jewish conception of the world as outward or coexistent with deity, it is co-equal in birth, and that's what this is all about. This is what gave rise to these heated brains, which were basically thriving on their own megalomania, who've caused absolute havoc. Yes, but basically they gave this argument in this book which shows you what a load of rubbish it all is. It says 32 is the sum of 10, the number of the 10 fingers, and 22, the number of the Hebrew alphabet. So 32 is 10 fingers and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This being afterwards further resolved into 3 plus 7 plus 12. And it goes on and on and on. So that gives you some idea of the lunacy of what we're dealing with here. And we said last week that even according to these occult writers, people like MacGregor Mathers, they were actually not even able to codify their own codes. So basically, what they actually interpreted and brought about really, well, in reality, meant absolutely nothing. But the Book of Jazira has nothing in common, apparently, with the later doctrines of Kabbalah, but preempted the later works and influenced them. Now, on our last show, Cabal, the global coup, we described how the Kabbalah was invented in these fevered minds of megalomaniacs. The 22 letters of the original Aramaic were copied and became Hebrew. Now, these Kabbalists claimed or pretended to be able to perform supernatural feats using the name of God and angels through symbolism. We talked about the divine apparition of Ezekiel, the Merkabah. This was really what it was all about in the first place, but then it went into complete megalomania and lunacy. The same delusion, though, has been sold to Westerners by fake gurus and charlatans throughout India. It's all the same stuff. The origins of Kabbalah are believed to have started in the 7th century, and its last influence was around the 18th century. There's two distinct periods, the 7th to the 13th century and the 14th to the 18th century. The Zohar of the 13th century was the major period of the Kabbalah and was the Bible of the Kabbalists. And it says, really, in this book I'm referring to tonight, the Kabbalah, its influence on Judaism and Christianity, which came out in the early part of the century and is a reprint by Kessinger Rare Books. That's got some very interesting stuff in it and very well put together. It says here, though, if the Bible was to be explained by the light of reason, then the Kabbalah was the opposite. Even the Talmud had been systemized and codified. Kabbalah was a reaction against rationality. The reaction against this system broke out in Provence and spread through Spain. Basically, it went back into Palestine later. Just as God speaks and creates in the Genesis story, so too can the mystic, according to these Kabbalists. The best known example of a magical incantation, though, is, guess what? Abracadabra, from Aramaic. It derives from abracadabra, Aramaic for, I create as I speak. And so the Kabbalists believe that under the rarest of circumstances, a human being may imbue lifeless matter with that intangible but essential spark of life, the soul. And that is actually a quote from my Jewish learning. So if they believe that, they believe that basically they can bring things to life. So they can bring things back from the dead. So it ties into necromancy, presumably here. And of course, that's, I suppose, where Mary Shelley got the story of Frankenstein from. But the Kabbalists saw the creation of a golem as a kind of alchemical task. Oh, here we go. The accomplishment of which proved the adept's skill and knowledge of Kabbalah. Well, the creation of living creatures out of clay is actually an old story. It goes further and goes back, well, it goes back a lot further than the Judaic golem. It goes much further back than that. And it's present in many of these ancient kind of tales, going back to, really, you could look at Scandinavian folklore for that as well. So the premise of the Kabbalists is based on Hebrew, which was merely a copy of the original and earlier Aramaic. So the Aramaic language would, by that analogy, be more magical than the later copied version. So if the Kabbalists think that Hebrew is the word of God, well, it can't be the word of God because it's based on Aramaic. So that would make Aramaic a superior language and Hebrew an inferior language if you used their own kind of logic. But basically the love of 11, 22 and 33 all comes from Kabbalistic thinking, which infected Freemasonry and their temple builders. We talked about the Freemasons, the builders of the allegorical Temple of Solomon, and we went into that in last week's show. We went into how Freemasonry is not a secret society, but a society with secrets. And Morgan's Freemasonry, which was written at the end of the 1800s, teaches you how to get into any Masonic lodge in the world if you should so wish. I can't think of anything more dull myself, but if you fancy it one night and the pub's open and you've had a few and there's a lodge in town and they've got something on, why not give it a go? They might be building a temple. They have these wooden bricks where they build Solomon's temple at the 7th degree onwards. Have a listen to last week's show. It'll horrify you and fascinate you at the same time, and also really make you glad that you're not part of this so-called secret society. Yeah, the last show, Cabal, the global coup. But the 13th century begins with the crystallization of the Kabbalah with Isaac the Blind. Yeah, And he was kind of influencing these later Kabbalists, such as Moses de Leon in the 12th century. And really, the precursor to all this, was Isaac the Blind, 1190 to 1210. The primary cause, basically, that he said of the world was En Soph, E-N-S-O-P-H, being infinite and boundless. From En Soph emanated the Sephiroth, the intermediaries between En Soph and the material world as seen and experienced. So Isaac the Blind was the first Kabbalist. So there you go. The Sephiroth are both active and passive. So let's get into these 10 Sephiroth now. We talked about bit about it last week. The first Sephiroth is inscrutable height, which is basically the crown. The second is wisdom or chokmah. Third is intelligence, bina. Fourth, love, chesed. 5, justice, pachad. 6, beauty, tifereth. 7, firmness, nezach. 8, splendour, hod. 9, righteousness and foundation of the world, yesod. Righteousness, tzedakah, that's number 10. Tzedakah is righteousness at number 10. The first 3 form the world of thought, the second 3 the world of the soul, the last 4 the world of the body, corresponding to intellectual, moral and natural worlds. So, Isaac the Blind can be regarded as the father of the Kabbalah. But it was Moses de Leon, who lived 1250 to 1305, who produced the Zohar, or Book of Splendor, which is really the book which influenced the later Kabbalists and caused a lot of division, not just within this religion of Judaism, but within other religions too. His pen name, Moses de Leon, that is, his pen name and alter ego was Simon ben Yochai, whom Moses de Leon maintained lived in a cave for 13 years to write the Zohar, receiving revelations from the prophet Elijah. I told you it was born in overheated brains, didn't I? Megalomania. The Jews and some Christians held in high esteem this heavenly revelation. This was in reality the birth of the New Age, of course, and its Kabbalah. But yes, we've got the reason why Moses de Leon actually published the Kabbalah, and it's actually quite humorous because it's not what people think. Moses de Leon couldn't get arrested when he wrote the book, and no one was buying it. So what he decided to do was issue it under pen names, and the pen name was Simon ben Yochai. And I've got a quote here from this book, which is actually very, very funny. This is the Kabbalah and its influence on Judaism and Christianity, wrote in the early part of the century. He says, we learn that when his wife asked him why he published the production of his own intellect under another man's name, Moses de Leon replied that if he were to publish it under his own name, nobody'd buy it. Whereas under the name of Rabbi Simon ben Yochai, it yielded him a large revenue. It was all about the money, folks. So the Kabbalah had restrained the reasoning faculty and stimulated the imagination and feelings. Now we can see this influence in the post-truth world, a world where feelings and belief win over facts. So basically the post-truth world is really a byproduct of Kabbalistic thinking and magical thinking. But the Kabbalah also laid aside all moralistic argument. It produced self-hypnosis, being mesmerised with visions and an inability to distinguish between right and wrong, which really messed things up later on. And we're going to get into that as the show progresses. Mix in with this the later New Age for Westerners in the form of neo-paganism, with branches of Hinduism coming in through the United Nations, following in the footsteps of Alice Bailey and Madame Helena Petrova Blavatsky. See last week's show for that. Kabbalah, a global coup. Cabal, a global coup, actually. It's in the list there. The later major Kabbalists, like Moses Cordovero in 1522 to 1570. That's when he lived, and Isaac Luria, who was much more important, 1534 to 1572. They produced quite a lot of works and gained a lot of followers, these two. That's Moses Cordovero and Isaac Luria. Cordovero produced a work called The Garden of Pomegranates. Isaac Luria says he was in touch with the prophet Elijah. Oh, wait a minute. There's a few others who've been in touch with him, aren't there? It must be catching. He was convinced he was the Messiah, was Isaac Luria. He said he was also the son of Joseph. He claimed to perform miracles. Now, this is very similar to these gurus and yogis, isn't it? So we see a very similar thing. So this is kind of an offshoot of Judaism, whereas the gurus and yogis are an offshoot of Hinduism. So we have con men in the New Age crossing over from both religions here. Quite interesting. Well, actually, let me correct myself, because Hinduism isn't a religion. It's basically a branch of philosophical thought and belief. Yeah, a lot of people need to make that distinction, I think, because when we get all these New Agers worshipping Kali, they don't even know what they're doing. They think Kali's the Earth Mother. No, Kali's a demon who hangs around graveyards with the 12 skulls of the other demons that she's killed round her neck, demanding blood sacrifices. I've actually seen the blood sacrifices. They go on all day in parts of Asia, chopping the heads off goats, killing thousands of buffalo, and it's a bloodbath. The New Age vegans, the Kali worshippers, wouldn't like that at all, but they don't know anything about it, which is why the New Age is absolutely about deception. That's one of the reasons. So Isaac Luria says he was in touch with the prophet Elijah, convinced that he was the Messiah and the son of Joseph, and claimed to perform miracles. He attracted thousands of followers, known as the novices and the initiated. He did enormous damage to Judaism, and he elevated the Zohar to a higher level than the Bible. This is where things really started to go wrong. And this is where we get this Illuminist branch of thinking coming into the Kabbalists, which of course went into the Rosicrucians. When Luria died, Chaim Vital Calabrese, 1543 to 1620, collected all of Luria's work and, together with his own notes, which he'd made, published Es Chaim, the Tree of Life. This is the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. He spent 30 years putting all this together, and it consists of 6 parts. Now, this caused a major backlash, but conversely, it laid hold to the minds of many Jews, and it really split that religion. It was to have disastrous consequences. Now, you can get this from all sources, because there's a lot of people within the religion of Judaism who know about this as well, including many rabbis. Look at the work of Gershon Scholem. He wrote a pretty definitive book on Kabbalah. And if you look on YouTube or your place of choice, of course, we're trying to get off there, but there are plenty of interviews about these Kabbalists, and it's very interesting when you start putting it together, because it's part of a much bigger picture of thinking. That's why I'm putting it into these shows, because these Kabbalists and these systems that they're using are absolutely involved with what we're going through at the moment. But the chief actor in the tragedy was the Kabbalist Sabbatai Zevi. He was born in the Greek city of Smyrna in 1641, and he was an avid student of the Kabbalists. He had audiences from the age of 18. At age 21, he announced to his disciples he was the Messiah, the son of David, the true Redeemer. He was to deliver Israel from captivity. Well, he had a lot on, didn't he? He publicly pronounced the Tetragrammaton, which only a high priest was allowed to do on the Day of Atonement. He would not desist from his megalomania and was excommunicated by the sages of Smyrna and went to Salonika in Athens, off to Morea, and then later to Jerusalem. He converted thousands, hundreds of thousands. Actually, when you look into this, it's massive. What he actually did, Sabbatai Zevi and his Sabbatean cult, is convert hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and he smashed apart a lot of people's belief systems. So in other words, the old system of Judaism, which was animal sacrifice, a temple and a Messiah, was completely taken over by this new form of dark influence, and it gets darker. But by order of the Sultan Muhammad IV, he was arrested. So Sabbatai Zevi was arrested. The Sultan said to him, I'm going to test your messiahship. Well, that seems fair, doesn't it? He says, so the Sultan says to Sabbatai Zevi, 3 poisoned arrows are to be shot into thee. If thee survives, I will believe you are the Messiah. So I think Sabbatai Zevi was no fool, and he capitulated and embraced Islam. He became known as Effendi. He died in 1676. He was buried actually by the Sufis. It's quite interesting. Sufism is a mystical form of Islam. I've actually been around some Sufis. They're quite interesting, but they do this whirling dervish dance. And isn't it easier just to sit there and meditate? They do it to get into a higher state of consciousness, but you can get into a higher state of consciousness without spinning round. So I suppose it's a bit of a distraction. Then you get into the assassins, the smokers of hashish. And yes, it all gets a bit crazy. So we've got this crossover now. We've got this crossover of Kabbalah into different religious belief systems. He brought ruin to thousands of Jews, but his following was not at all diminished. Later, we get the Zoharite Jacob Frank, or as he was known at birth, Jankiu Leibovitz, who founded the Jewish Sabbatean Frankists. He was born in Poland in 1712. He preached a new doctrine based on that of Sabbatai Zevi. He was arrested by the rabbis and liberated by guess who? The Roman Catholic clergy. And a lot of people within the religion of Judaism do actually say that the Roman Catholics and the Jesuits are also Kabbalists. This is quite interesting. When you look at the Rosicrucians, it all starts to add up. But yes, he was allowed to preach his doctrine, was Jacob Frank. His followers were Zoharites. They were believers in the Zohar. They elevated the Zohar higher than the Bible, this mystical book of ramblings written by Moses de Leon, or Simon ben Yochai, which was his pen name, to make some money. But Joseph Frank, here we go, accepted Christianity. His sect became more popular in Poland and Bohemia until he died in 1791. So he converted as well. He was a converso because he got himself into big trouble. So he converted to Christianity as well. So their followers, the followers of Sabbatai Zevi, formed these Masonic lodges which spread out through Salonika and Turkey called the Donmei. The main ideas were that the Messiah would return if there was enough evil wrought upon the world. The Messiah comes when there is chaos. So the Sabbateans create as much chaos as possible in the hope that the Redeemer will come in and save them. Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank have divided Jews ever since, and their followers continue to create their chaos through Freemasonry and any other outlet that they can use. This cult is what is known as deformed Judaism, all through the Kabbalah and its deception and fantasy. The religious side of a temple, a sacrifice and Messiah is bypassed with the cult of Frankism. The Sabbatean Frankists recruit outside Judaism and have assimilated into Islam and Christian cults, masquerading through the Rosicrucians who accept Kabbalah. The cult deny they are members and carry on the reversal of natural law. So this is a very dangerous cult, this Frankist cult, because the people do not actually have to have any religion. They can masquerade under any religion they like. They can masquerade under any name they like, because what they do is secret, private. It's not in the public. It is a large clique, and they promote each other. They promote each other very heavily, and they have a huge network. Authors who have written about Kabbalists and the Sabbateans include Gershon Scholem, as I said earlier on. That book's available. I think you can get it as a free PDF. Kabbalah by Gershon Scholem. The COVID master plan needs countering. And that is why we need to know about this stuff, because we need now to counter these secretive movements of people, these people who are plotting our demise and form networks. I'm going to be getting more into this over the next few weeks and really go into more of what I've been talking about kind of irregularly on the show in the past. If you look at articles such as A Cult That Rule the World, New Age Global Governance, you'll start seeing how Kabbalah ties all this stuff together. So the New Agers have been absolutely hoodwinked into this cult, and they are unknowing receptacles of what is actually going on. So as this kind of develops, this knowledge that we're putting out, I think it's very important now to start really forming alliances. I've been talking about that for ages, and that is something which is starting to happen, because the way I see it, there's going to be two tiers in society. There's going to be people who they cannot control and who will be outside it. I don't think that this prediction that everyone's going to be rounded up will actually happen. The only thing we've really got to be worried about are the public. The public are the worst enemy, because they are the ones who go #Wibble and call everything, including facts, conspiracy theories and hate. And if these lot can be recruited and turned against the people who can think, then that is, to me, the real problem. Yeah, the reversal of all our values, which is what I was talking about tonight, is through this Kabbalistic thinking. And there has never been a time when integrity was more important, and integrity and truth. Integrity and truth have to be the most important thing at the moment, because there's so many lies about. But I'm just going to conclude with this epilogue, which is quite interesting. And again, it's from this book, The Influence of Kabbalah on Judaism and Christianity. It says, the Kabbalah in relation to Judaism and Christianity. Judaism. It must be acknowledged that the Kabbalah intended to oppose philosophy and to intensify religion. Intensify, really, this kind of occult thinking. But by introducing a heathenish idea, it grafted it onto Judaism, a conception of the world which was foreign to it, and produced the most pernicious results. In place of the monotheistic biblical idea of God, according to which God is the creator, preserver and ruler of the world, the confused, pantheistically coloured heathenish doctrine of emanation was substituted. The belief in the unity of God was replaced by the decade of the 10 Sephiroth, which were considered as divine substances. By no longer addressing prayers directly to God, but to the Sephiroth, a real Sephiroth cult originated. And that is the story of deception and the New Age and this Kabbalistic thinking. It's basically having a very bad form of system and intermediary to truth and fact, which have been locked out. Of course, the post-truth world is absolutely a result of Kabbalistic type thinking. So I hope you've enjoyed that show. I'm going to be back on Tuesday and Thursday at republicbroadcasting.org at 8 p.m. Go to windowsontheworld.net. Do help us out if you can, with some chickpea tokens. And I'm working on our film, which we should have by the end of the year. And anyone who supports us on Patreon will get a copy of the film. I'm actually hoping to do some screenings. And I'm also doing some secret talks up and down the country. Yes, I'm getting out and about. And there are people who are forming groups and networks. And I've got some great information which I will be putting out over the next few weeks. If you have information, please send it in. And that's about it for tonight's show. I'm going to check chat now. Thanks for listening, and see you all on Tuesday, Thursday, and of course Sunday at 9:30 p.m.